Hey, episode of Devs in the Shed. So myself, Matthew Coles, the principal TAM working at AWS Australia. Paul Kukel, one of the senior SAs working in Melbourne, Australia as well. So for those that are just joining for the first time, the Devs in the Shed is really about working in our cabins or sheds, as you can see by our backgrounds, getting hands-on with the tools, and we have a special guest today. And I've also let my cat into the cabin, so you can see her in the background there.
So is the cat the guest, or is it Nathan?
So Nathan is the guest. I'll let him introduce himself in a second. But my cat was very keen because she heard a rumor that there was a cat feeder that Nathan had built. And one of the things that she absolutely loves in life is pigging down cat biscuits. So you can actually hear her cry. So Nathan, give us a little rundown of who you are. I know it's early. You're in Western Australia. Maybe just a 2-second intro into the project as well. Why and what you built.
Sure. Hi, I'm Nathan Glover. From Perth, Western Australia. My background is kind of in IT networking, but I'm a bit of a hobbyist, so I kind of build a lot of random stuff. 3D printer in the background, random Lego. I don't know. I love IoT as well. So today I'm going to talk about a project I worked on. It's like an IoT cat feeder. So we'll be going through the steps I took to set this up and get it running and opening and closing. I'm using AWS IoT Greengrass.
Very cool.
We've had so many people ask about Greengrass, and we ourselves have looked at it and played with it a bit. We've done tons of work on the Raspberry Pi, so it's super good to have someone that's going to, dive into Greengrass and get that going.
Yeah, I've spent more time than I'm willing to admit in the Greengrass world. Obviously started off with Greengrass 1 and now Greengrass 2 is out, which is what we're going to be using today. So if anyone has any questions around like why, what you should choose, what you should use for projects, feel free to drop them in the chat. Happy to answer any questions around that.
Excellent. Well, I guess like one of the things, if we're honest, Paul and I are like, yeah, let's do a Greengrass project together, and like we played with it for probably like an hour, Paul, right?
We played with it for a while, and then I had some issues with my Raspberry Pi, and then we got stuck with another project, and then I didn't want to format my Raspberry Pi to set it all back up again, so we sort of kept pushing it out.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. And so we looked it up online, and we're like, "Who's the specialist?" And Nathan was at the top of the results, and we realized he was a fellow Australian. So we reached out, and even better, right? Like, I think Paul, you might be more of a dog person, right? But I've got way too many cats. Used to have dogs, and so we thought that's a cool solution. So let's bring him on. In terms of how you created all of this, right? Like, what were the main components to kind of bring this together? Like, what was the device that you had attached to the cat feeder? And you can see
what's the cat doing in the background.
It's sunny, like it's been raining all week, so I think she wants to go out and enjoy the sun for the first time ever, right?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, so in terms of like it's quite a simple kind of sort of setup. So I bought a like cat feeder, and obviously it's a cat and dog feeder, but it's not smart. And then I got a sort of a small servo, very technical, but there's a wooden popsicle stick and a piece of plastic that I've hot glued onto the piece of wood and servo. And then I control all of that from a Raspberry Pi 0W.
Nice.
And I've modified it slightly to use, there's a USB-A add-on board. So basically you can solder on a little Type A that like allows you to just plug it straight into a computer to power it, which is handy. I didn't actually use it for this project, but and then everything else is controlled via just some Python code that's on the actual device itself, which I'll show in a bit.
Very nice. Let's run through it end to end. And while you're doing that as well, I guess the audience, let us know any questions that you might have. Let's keep this quite interactive. Nathan's got quite a bit to walk through end to end, but we can completely deviate if you guys want to talk about something, because I know, as Paul mentioned, like we've had 3 times we've done IoT, and each time we've had Greengrass in the chat. So it's finally happened.
Sure.
So let's dive in. Yeah.
I might share just my screen to start with.
Cool.
So what I'll do to start with is I might just show you it kind of working, or maybe some of the Python code that's on the device. Then we'll go into the AWS side of things. So let's, for starters, let's just log into the Raspberry Pi. So I've already set up the Raspberry Pi itself. It's already connected to the internet. I just use the sort of standard Raspberry Pi guides to do that. Everything else is really standard. So,
what version of the Pi is it?
It is it's the Raspberry Pi Zero W initial, like it's the initial release that it came out with. So this is probably like 3 or 4 years ago now.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, the Pi Zeros are just so cheap, and the Ws, I mean, they're like $16 or something.
Yeah, and they're only getting cheaper as well, some of the originals. So, yeah. So obviously right now I'm actually connected into the Raspberry Pi itself. I already have a cat feed Python script on here, which we'll just use to test to see if we're able to articulate the servo. So I'll open up that code to start with. So really all this code does is opens up a line to the pin that's on the actual board itself connected to the servo, which is pin 18 on the Raspberry Pi. The rest of this is quite, the only real hard stuff is the servo code. So this is like the duty cycle and the PWM cycles, which I don't fully understand. I sort of had to Google around to find this and like, what's the best PWM values to use to open and close the servo. So I came to a duty cycle of like 7 and 2.5. And I will run it now while the camera's up. Python. Cat. And what should happen when I run it is it reset to start with, and then it opened and closed. So I'll run it again just to give it a better. So the idea is that it should open, some food should come out, and then it should close. So that's effectively what the base code is doing. But I thought, I want to be able to control this remotely because it's not very useful if I've just got the cat feeder next to me and I get a robot to open and close it for me, because how is that really helping my process? Like, if I'm next to the cat feeder, I could probably open and close it myself anyway. So I thought, okay, maybe I can use some of my AWS IoT skills to automate this or make it available for me to control all over the world. So I thought, okay, we'll use Greengrass. So what I'm going to go through now is maybe setting up a Greengrass device. So this device is fresh. It doesn't have any Greengrass on it at all. And what I'm going to do is go through the steps of setting up Greengrass on this device. So I'm going to share my new screen.
I know. So you're using the Pi Zero. I think from the docs, it doesn't specifically call out Pi Zero. Was there much difference to get Greengrass configured for Pi Zero?
Nothing that I could really, nothing noticeable, to be honest. There were 2 steps that you need to do just before you install Greengrass, which I'll go through as well. It's really just installing Java. So now that Greengrass v2 sort of is built on Java itself, you just need to install the OpenJDK, I believe, or OpenJRE, one of those 2, on the device itself too. But that's all sort of explained in the Greengrass docs as well.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. By memory, it was slightly different because of some of the versions of Java or the JDKs don't install as easily on the Pi Zero or the later versions. I think OpenJDK is only supported to 1.8 or something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, interesting.
It's something to do with that ARM chip. And I think is it like Azure JDKs? I think they work 1.16 and 1.11.
Okay. I know that, so I've got the commands that I sort of run for this. So I'll paste them in and show you.
I was going to say, maybe that's not a problem with the Pi Zero 2, right? Like one of the things that I'm quite excited about, and I'll just share the link in the chat, is the Pi 2.0, right? So this has only just come out. I've ordered one for myself. It arrived like 2 days ago. But it seems to have like a lot stronger processor. So maybe that's kind of a non-issue if you've got like yourself one of the brand new ones.
Interesting. Yeah, I've I think I heard of that one coming. That looks cool on my old one as well.
Yeah, it's like exactly the same size, but I think it's like a variation of like what they have on the full fat Raspberry Pis.
Yeah,
just
I
checking
think
in the
it was-
background. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I just quickly looked there. It was JDK 1.8 will install from OpenJDK, but anything newer, you need to do some extra fiddling around and use one of the alternate JDKs.
Yeah, so I'll share the if I share the terminal now, I should be able to show you. It's shared, I think.
Yep, there we go.
So those were the commands I ran to kind of pre-pep the system. So I just installed OpenJDK 8. I installed curl and unzip just because I thought you do actually need those to unzip a zip that we pull down for the Greengrass installer. And then I installed Python 3 pip because I know this code's going to run on Python and there might be some sort of Python dependencies that I need to install later on. So I won't run that now, but that's what I ran to sort of pre-spec this device up ready for Greengrass. And the only other thing I did as well was I installed the AWS CLI in pip as well. Again, probably I did need to do this. Actually, I probably didn't need to do this, but I thought, okay, I might need to do some AWS commands later on. As you'll see later in this tutorial, we actually put creds onto this device. So I thought I'll put it on there. This isn't required, but it might be something you want to do as well. So now I'm going to go through the process of installing Greengrass. I'm just going to share. I wonder if I should just share my whole screen, if it's going to be easier than switching between the two.
Yeah, it might be. We'll see how that looks. I'm just going to keep muting myself because one of my neighbors is mowing the lawn.
Oh, good. Cool. So I'm just going to share the whole screen. If it's too big, let me know.
That's okay. We might just have to do a Command plus to zoom in, right? Or Control plus. Yep.
Cool. Okay, so when you sort of get started with AWS Greengrass, you need to be logged into an account. So I've actually created a demo account. This is a fresh account for this. We're going to go to Greengrass itself. So you can just type Greengrass at the top there. I'm going to be doing this demo in the Sydney region, but I'm fairly sure most regions support Greengrass 2 now. However, it's probably worth double checking that if you're in a region where it's not supported. But I think you'll know pretty quickly because you won't see this classic V1 anymore down here. It'll probably just be classic if only Greengrass 1 is supported in your region. So to get started with Greengrass 2, we're just going to click set up one core device. Now they've made this process a lot easier. In the past, you had to sort of create certificates. You had to link certificates to roles. You had to link the certificate to the device. You had to attach a device identity to a device itself. It wasn't seamless. Like it wasn't an easy process. I found with Greengrass 2, this process has been streamlined a lot. So for starters, we're just going to call our device something. So I'm going to call it cat feeder 1. I think already exists for that, so I'm going to call it number 2. And then I've actually already created a group. You can create a new group. We'll create a new group. We'll call it cat feeders. I've got a group called that, so I'm going to call it cat feeders new. And then you need to find, actually, this was something cool. Yesterday, they released Greengrass for Windows, which is interesting. So if you've got Windows Edge devices, you can actually install Greengrass Core onto that now. So there's a guide for installing on Windows specifically. Might be something like if you're running Windows at home, you could potentially try this out on your desktop if you wanted to. That's always an option. However, for this, we're going to be using Linux because I've got a Raspberry Pi and that's running Linux. Now, you need to configure, so we've already installed Java on the device itself. There's more information there on how to do that. But we need to put creds on this device now. So I anticipated the fact that I might need to show creds on stream. So I created a nice little sort of cheat for this. So I'll show you, but in the repository I've got up on my GitHub, I've created a CloudFormation template that just basically allows you to create a role that's bound to an IP address. So it's just going to mean that these creds aren't going to be able to be used by anybody else. So this role here is defined in this Learn More page. So I'll click it to show you. But effectively, there's like a minimal IAM policy for installing the provision resources. And that's this role here. So this is going to allow just the bare minimum of what you need to deploy this sort of Greengrass stack. And I've actually deployed that CloudFormation template. Now, you don't have to do this. You could just use your admin creds. I just figured because I'm putting this on Twitch, I don't particularly want to share admin creds. So this stack just outputs a set of creds that can only be used from my house effectively, which is kind of handy.
Someone might feed your cat too much food or something.
Exactly. Or make a million cat feeders in my account.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to the guide quickly. And what it needs is these access tokens put in. So I'm just going to put that and then grab the access ID. And we won't need a session token because that's for if you're using, I guess, single sign-on or if you're using a role, for example. But because we're just using a standard user account, we don't need the session token. Cool. And that should be all we need there. So now this is where the sort of setup becomes a lot easier than what it used to be. All of these steps here used to be quite manual. You had to do it all yourself, but now they've sort of simplified this down into sort of 2 commands, which is you install Greengrass itself. So you pull down the zip file with the entire Greengrass bundle, and then you run the installer in one command too. And the installer includes a bunch of parameters we'll go through as well, but I'm just going to run this curl command to...
Can you increase the font? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Read my mind.
There we go. Let me just... It shouldn't take that long. I think it's about a 60 megabyte blob that gets pulled down. There we go. So that should be installed now, or at least it's extracted. So this is the provisioning kit. And then we can use the provisioning kit by running this command. So I'm just going to go through each of these steps. You define where you want it to install, which is this droot. You define the sort of entry point for Greengrass, which is, this is the folder we just downloaded. This is this Greengrass core. If you ls, you can actually see that's the folder there that we just extracted. You're telling it, this is the entry point you want to use. You tell it which region you want to deploy into. You tell it the thing name you want to deploy. The group, which is our new group there, that cat feed is new. And then you tell it what user accounts you want created. So by default, it's just GGC user and GGC group, which is Greengrass core user and Greengrass core group. If you want to change that, you can, but you just need to be aware that some subcomponents might rely on those users existing. So I'd probably recommend just leaving that default. Provision just means it's going to deploy, it's going to, I think that just means it's going to set the device up. The system service is it creates a systemd service to run Greengrass on startup because you might not want it run at the startup. In that case, you can tell it no. And deploy dev tools is Greengrass v2 has its own CLI that allows you to run it from the device itself. I'm going to set that as true as well because I'm going to show you just something cool you can do with that once it's installed. So I'm going to hit copy on those commands and hope it works.
Excellent. I think let's zoom in one more time. Actually, it looks like
Sure.
we've got, yeah, perfect. There we go. Yep.
So this shouldn't take that long usually. Depends on the speed of your Raspberry Pi, obviously. But when I ran this last night, it probably took about 2 minutes to deploy. But yeah, I guess, are there any kind of questions people have in the meantime, or is there any projects people are working on with IoT that they might be interested in using Greengrass for? Feel free, drop those in the comments. Oh, there we go, it's working. So that's a good sign. So what this means is it's the device is able to communicate with AWS, which is great. It means that role is working. It is effectively setting up the certificates, creating the device, provisioning and attaching the certificate, adding the thing to the new group. That error is normal. Ignore it. It's fine. That error is less normal, but that's okay. So I've seen this problem happen occasionally. I think it's a race condition problem. It says it doesn't have access to this role, but it's definitely there in the role. So I was thinking of filing a bug for that because I'm not sure if that's normal. Because when I run it again, it does actually work. So I'm just going to run the provisioner again. Again, it's not going to break our device or anything. All it will do is just bring it back into line. So just to be 100% sure that it's going to work for this demo, I'm going to just rerun the command again. Again, I didn't run into this issue prior to 2 days ago. So I'm wondering if maybe there wasn't the update that they rolled out. Because I think they're on version 2.5.0 now. I think there was a previous update that I didn't have this problem on, but the newest update I am. So it might just be worth noting that, like, I don't think this particular problem breaks anything. I'm just trying to be safe by running it twice, just because I know I didn't get the error the second time I run it. So.
Perfect. And I'm big as well, right? Secondly, even if it did work the first time. I can see that some people are pretty excited in the chat. We've got This Is So Beans. So it does look like people are enjoying it. But yeah, I would be really keen as the stuff runs through of kind of hearing what people are working on in terms of their little IoT projects, if they've ordered themselves a little Pi 02 or a Pi Pico. I know Paul's just gotten a Pi Pico and he was playing with it a couple of weeks ago too, right? And it's a pretty cool device.
Yeah, I actually connected the Pico to a little, actually it's right here, but my son has a little solar panel. It's a tiny little solar panel that puts out like 4 volts or something, but almost like no current. But this was enough to power just this, no battery, to power the Pico. So I was able to run programs on the Pico powered by the sun, which was really interesting.
So it looks like it has finished, which is good. So I'm going to jump back over to the console itself.
And I reckon increase the console just by 1 as well. It might help people. And
here we go. Is that potentially good? Or I'll go 1 more.
Yeah, that's good.
Blue thing at the top too. Okay, so we're going to click View Core Devices now. That's not going to go away, is it? Let me scroll up 1. So yep, now we see our device is here and healthy. Reported 9 seconds ago at status, which is good. Means the demo worked. So I'm going to click on that device and just sort of let's have a look at what kind of settings we have available to it. So it's showing that we're running our Core 2.5.0, which was released a couple days ago. At the moment, there's no components. So components are kind of, I'm going to use the term modules, doesn't really simplify it though, but it's effectively just like packages of software that you run that's kind of isolated to itself. We're going to go through the process of actually, the cat feeder itself is a component that we're going to build. So then you've got deployments, which are like deployments of components. So you can say, I want to install 4 different components, which we're actually going to do now. So, but I'm quickly going to show you as well. There's thing groups, so it shows you which groups they're part of. Client devices, which are, if you want devices attached to your Greengrass core, like on wherever you're running it, but you don't want those devices attached directly to AWS, you can have them kind of connect to your core as their like arbiter of information. So let's go and actually do like our first deployment for our device.
So just to recap, like the component is the specific program. You may want to install one or many programs. Therefore, deployment is picking which of those programs you want to install. Yep. The group is if you've got more than one device, so you can install, like, apply a deployment which may have a number of programs onto a group of devices.
Yep. And you can define a bunch of parameters as well with a components install, which I will show you an example of now. So we're going to create a new deployment. We'll call it deployment for new cat feeder. And you can either specify a device or a group. So this is where it's really handy, because if you have like 20 cat feeders in your house, for starters, you might have a problem if you've got that many cat feeders, but that's okay. Maybe your cats just like to eat. So, or you could just divide to one device. So we're going to go to the group though. So we're going to select our new cat feeder group. And then now you get a list of sort of components that are available to you. So you've got the public components, which are the ones that AWS kind of manage and vet. There's also other vendors that might manage and vet components as well. So you've got examples like if you need to send a message to SNS, there's a component to do that. If you want to run object detection, there is a component to do that as well, which is kind of cool. So there's all sorts of sort of vetted components that you can use. All of them have support pages too. So if you want to, for example, if you wanted to see what TensorFlow Lite did, you can open that in a new tab. And it will kind of show you there's the documentation up there. So each of these support pages kind of tells you like what operating systems might be supported, what you might need to run on the device itself to get that component running, potentially like what firewall rules or what other tools you might need in the device, and then some information about dependencies. So there's heaps of stuff you can go through to kind of, if they pique your interest, have a click on them, see what's available. For now, I'm just going to close that one off. And we're just going to install the basics that we need on this device. So we're going to install the CLI, and we're going to install Nucleus. And Nucleus is like the core. I think right now the device actually, it has Nucleus on it. It's just not part of the deployment. It's sort of like the core to Greengrass. So we're going to bring it in as part of our deployment by just selecting those two. We're going to add another one later on, but I'll do that when we get to it. So you've got your two components that you want. Now you can configure these as well. So if you want to go in and say, I want to configure Nucleus to have other settings, you can go click on it, go configure. And it's got a bunch of default settings. So say maybe you have a custom IoT endpoint you want it to talk to instead of using the default one in your account. You can define that in there. Maybe you change the Greengrass port. You can define that in there too. So this is sort of more advanced settings. You more than likely won't need to touch these, but it's good to know you can do that. So I'm going to go cancel on that. We're not going to modify it at all. We're just going to put these two devices on, or these two components. There's some advanced settings around like if you want the rollout to happen all at once, or if you want it to do like a device at a time. Timeout and rollback too. So if like the device crashes or one component crashes, you can tell it, hey, I want to go back to a last known good state. So we'll just go review and hit deploy. And that's pretty much it. What I'm actually going to do now is jump back onto the Pi and kind of show you it rolling out. So if I changed into a pseudo user and then go into the Greengrass folder, so this is where it installed to by default when we sort of specified. In this folder, you've got a bunch of secrets. I'm not going to open up the private keys, but I'm going to go into logs. And here you can kind of see the logs of the different components that are getting deployed onto devices. So you can tail out that like Greengrass log, for example, and see a bunch of very verbose gibberish that you really don't need to worry about. But if you're ever having problems, it's usually best to just go into this log directory and printing out this greengrass.log and looking for anything that might stand out as a big problem. But you can also obviously debug in the console too. So if you go to the device itself, you know it's deployed because it'll have components listed here. So right now it's still in the process of deploying. Doing something. It's resolving the dependencies now. So another thing you can do is
it took a couple of minutes for this piece to go through, and I was tailing all of those logs, wondering like what was going on. It's
semi-helpful, the logs. They're like probably not super helpful to beginners, but I guess the best one would be to like systemctl status Greengrass. just to make sure Greengrass is actually running. That's another kind of good one to know, just because if Greengrass isn't running, it's not going to deploy. So, and usually if Greengrass is running, it can probably sort itself out. What I found with this stuff, with the Greengrass VT stuff, is it does eventually work itself out. Sometimes it'll have like backlog jobs that are being pushed down to devices still that are slightly out of date and has to complete them in order. So if you do a bunch of deployments all at once, you might find each job takes a couple minutes to go through and you won't immediately see the changes. So just going to refresh that. Cool. So now those components are actually showing up. CLI is running, which is, I think, usual. I think it's normal, yeah. And the nucleus is finished too, which is the important one. So I'm just going to bring back up the device here. And if we go back to this top level, I'm fairly sure that we should have I had a command here earlier that I used. But if you go
Greengrass commands that you can run Greengrass commands now, right?
Yeah, so there's a Greengrass CLI, which should be in. Oh no, it's in bin. That's right. So there's this Greengrass CLI, which is now on the device. And I think if you type ggc root path and just tell it we're in Greengrass v2, now you can do things like component list. Again, because I'm on the Pi, I found some of these commands can take upward of 20 to 30 seconds to run occasionally, especially the first time. If you are kind of worried about that, you can obviously get a more powerful Raspberry Pi. But I think since these are, oh, there we go. It's actually running fairly quickly now. Cool. So what it's done is it's printed out the various components installed on the device. So you can see Nucleus is running. There's a bunch of other services that, so deployment service probably manages deployments. These ones I'm not too sure about, probably just reporting back logs, and the CLI, which we also installed. So those components are now up and running. There's other things you can do with the CLI, like you can actually do deployments for the CLI, but I think for this case, I'm going to use the console to do deployment of a component because it's a little easier to understand what's going on. So let's go ahead and put the code for making the cat feeder actually articulate onto the device itself. So to do that, I'm actually going to fire up a new terminal.
This was the part that I was really interested in, right? This is what like Paul and myself had played with for about an hour.
Yeah, the component stuff is, so there's a little bit of setup we have to do because I guess the idea behind, I'll show you the code that the component works with, but
yeah.
Components have like a recipe. So this defines like all the various pieces.
Can you zoom that in?
Yeah, let's zoom in.
Oops. Oh gosh, VS Code, how do I?
And we've got Rovezo7. She wants to use this to feed her two cats. So it looks like we've got we could have a group form. We're looking at the group options before, and I was like, you could almost run this at a cattery, right? Like in terms of feeding time.
You could, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so here we go.
This is a recipe. So recipe is what defines a component and all of its like pieces. So a lot of this stuff you can ignore. You do need to make sure the component name it's like not in the Amazon. So you can't have I don't think you can have AWS to start there because that's the Amazon namespace. But from what I can tell, unless you're publishing components, you don't really need to worry too much about this being unique. So I have just some basic sort of setup for a Linux platform. And all that happens is this component, when it runs, it's going to run the cat or the feed cat Python file, and it's going to pass it in an argument, which is this configuration message. And that configuration message is defined as like the default message. So you could change that to be, I don't know, woof, because I don't know, cats, woof. No, they don't. But maybe, yeah, the default message can be woof. That would be passed into the feed the cat Python file. And then you can see this feed the cat Python file here. And again, this looks really similar to the one we showed at the start. So this is just that feed cat class that I wrote that sort of makes the cat feeder move. But all we're doing is we're taking the system argument taken as part of that message, so that woof, and that's what that system args does. And it's going to print out hello woof, and then articulate the cat feeder by running the cat feed code there.
So I guess then you could pass it in to open it up longer, or I don't know, like ring a bell or something, play a sound or something, and then the cat's know that when the bell goes, the thing's going to open or something.
Anything you can dream up, you can pretty much do. So in my case, I'm just opening a feeder, but you could literally do anything, which is kind of cool. The part that we do need to set up, and this is the part where I think the tutorial kind of falls down a little bit, is you do need to upload this feedcat Python file somewhere that's accessible to the Greengrass deployment. And for that, we needed a bucket to be created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some other creds, which I'm not as keen to show in the terminal. So I'm just going to remove my screen off.
Let me pop that down. So your screen's disappeared for everyone.
All right, cool. I'm just going to paste this in.
I was thinking you could evolve this with, like a little motor that moves like a pen light around, and so you could also like use it as a cat play device. So you could have it as the ultimate solution when it comes to babysitting your cats when you're in the office.
And you could get it to like think, or you could get it to like detect light even, or like detect the cat using that image detector. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, machine learning. I like block a cat, right? Like out of my free cats, if council asks, I have 2 cats, but out of my free cats, I've got one that takes all the others' food. So maybe we could have like a little gateway to block the food if the one that the vet needs to, is wanting to lose weight. Yeah.
It's not a half bad idea.
Excellent.
So what I'm going to do now is I just need to set up some environment variables. So I'll paste these in here. So all this does is it puts the account ID into an environment variable. If you've got your account ID, just put it there. Like ultimately, you don't need to worry too much about whatever this command does. But I just didn't want to have to paste in my account ID there. So, and then next, I'm going to set a environment variable for the region too. So again, all of this stuff should be set for you automatically. But I'm going to be quite specific because I want it to 100%. I just want 100% know it's going to deploy to the right region when I do it. So I'm going to define AP Southeast 2. Next, we've got to create that bucket here. So this bucket doesn't exist, or in my case, it probably does exist because I've tested this prior. But what I do is AWS S3 make a bucket and then define the bucket, passing in that account ID and the region. And then I just tell it I want it to be deployed into the AP Southeast 2 region too. So it'll probably say bucket already exists, but I'll just, cool. So it's created and you already own it, which is good. Next, we need to create...
And the cat's finally perked up her interest.
I have
sit on my shoulder. Where's yours? Yeah, let's bring them on.
Here's Gracie.
Nice.
She was asleep. She was not happy I picked her up, so...
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. So this is probably the hardest step in the whole thing. You need to create basically a policy that allows the Greengrass role or the Greengrass certificate to talk to that bucket. What I would recommend doing is we can either create it via the, I think for this tutorial, I'm probably just going to do it the way that I kind of intended to do it to start with, which is effectively, I'm just going to create a JSON file with this statement inside it. Mm-hmm. That has the action S3 get object on the resource bucket. So that's the bucket we just created there. So when I run this, I'll just run it. I'll show you the output. When I run it, you'll see there's the account ID there. There's that region. So this was these environments variables we passed in last time. And then what we need to do is we need to create a policy for that. Again, I have a sort of a nice little script that does this already. All of this is up on my GitHub too, which I'll bring it up now just so people can maybe have a look at it while they're doing it. But the code is on this. Oops. I'm T04 Gloven, and the project is AWS Greengrass v2 cat feeder. So all the kind of guides, this whole repository, all of it is up there. And then I also have sort of more details on how this project comes together on my blog as well. My blog is DevOpsStar, and there's a page called Feeding My Cat with AWS IoT Greengrass v2. It's got a search feature, my blog, so you can just kind of, okay, someone's posted it in the chat too, but this post goes through like the entire setup. So if you run into any problems for all of this, it's all documented here. So what we're doing today is going through all of this. And if any of it doesn't make sense, definitely check the blog out for more information, and do reach out too. Like, I'm happy to help out with anybody doing projects on this kind of stuff. Twitter, LinkedIn, all of those places, I'm available. So, but for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload that policy, and to do that, I'm just going to use another CLI command, which is im create policy. This policy name, it doesn't need to be this, but I've just used that terminology because in the docs, that's what they recommend calling it. Artifact policy. So artifact just referring to like the code that you're uploading is like considered an artifact. And then the policy document is that JSON we just created. Okay, so it already exists because I've already run this tutorial just to make sure it works. And then the final thing we need to do is attach this policy to a role. And this is the final, like, complicated part, I promise. So this role here, this Greengrass v2 token exchange role, is very important. So that role already exists within the account. It's provisioned by AWS for this device, or for us to use and inherit, assume from this device. And we're going to pass it the policy that we just created there. And again, this probably should fail because it's already done. So that's good.
We did have a question about your blog. Do you have an RSS feed version of it?
I think so. I think it's built on Gatsby, and I think I installed the RSS plugin for it. I don't remember how you get to the feed. Is it like there should be a site? There should be a sitemap there, and I think the sitemap includes the RSS feed. Maybe. Yeah. Okay. I'll investigate that actually, because I think I installed it. I just don't know if I ever tested it, which is usual.
Yep.
Cool. So now that we've got the policy created, that's all the hard stuff done. All we need to do now is we need to put this Python feedcat file into the bucket. And to do that, I've got another handy command, which I'll go through. But all we're doing is going to do AWS S3 copy, and we're going to copy that feedcat file that's here. So that's artifacts, feedcat, version 1, feedcat. And that's the bucket name and the location, which needs to match that location there. Cool, and it's copied in. And what I'm going to do is, I was going to try to keep my stuff secret, but then I was like, nah, matter. It's a burner account anyway, so. I just need to put those that account ID and that region back into this artifacts list here. So if you're running through this at home, I actually call it out in the blog post too, but you just need to make sure to replace these before we do the deploy. Cool. So now let's jump back over to Greengrass console, and we'll do the rest in there. So if we go back to components, we are going to create a new component. Now they have some example sort of recipes here that you can use if you want to build like a Hello World. Like you can already see that I've kind of already copied the Hello World example because they've got this message equals world, configuration message, and passing the message in. So ours is obviously very simple, very similar, but it meows like a cat. So I'm going to grab this entire template here. I'm just going to copy it. I'm going to get that NVIDIA thing. I'm going to jump back up. Oh no, sorry, I just need to reload back in. Don't worry, there's no tokens. So I have a 1 hour session token that gets applied. So create component. We're going to enter the recipe as YAML. I'm just going to delete all of the existing YAML and paste in the one that we just copied. That looks good. No warnings, no errors. And we're just going to go create component.
When you did this the first time, Nathan, did you follow the AWS docs page?
I did. I also followed the, I'll bring it up. There's the AWS Greengrass V2 workshop. So there's like a, those AWS workshop pages. Yep. I've got it up here. I think it's greengrass2 workshop.aws. This page is fantastic. Like it really helped me practically understand what was going on with a lot of this stuff. If anybody else, if you want more examples of stuff you can do, definitely jump onto this workshop page, especially around like PubSub or like creating your own Lambda. Like they have really great docs showing like proper real world examples. So
I'm pretty sure as well with that workshop, you don't need to have a Raspberry Pi. They mimic everything within EC2.
Yes, yeah, which is even better. So you can learn without needing to buy stuff. So the default config set, components created, you can kind of see that's the bucket. Now we're going to run a deployment of this. So we're going to add that to our existing deployment. So we're going to go back into deployments. We're going to click on the deployment for the cat feeder group that we just created. And we're going to click revise. Before I do that, see how this is like versioned? When I click revise, what it's going to do is create a new version of this. So we'll leave that as default. Now we can see that feed cat component is showing up there. So we're going to go next. Now you can configure it. So you could select it, go configure component. And if you wanted to, you could update this message back to meow. So you could go place it there and then go meow, which wait, maybe that won't work. I believe it needs to be in a certain format, which I will come back to. Why didn't that work? That's odd. Maybe it does work. No, it doesn't. Sorry, I'll come back to this. I definitely recall, I think it might just be the structure that I'm using. But yeah, I'll come back to this in the next step just to show you that actually working. Because I think it needs an extra bracket or braces around it.
And Paul, I can see you're on mute. And yeah.
I was saying something about the way it merges it with the braces.
Yeah.
Dev can hear my cat. She wants to go out to the sunshine, so she's meowing everywhere, right? Had rain like last 3 weeks in Melbourne. I take her to the cabin. She realizes it's sunny outside, so I'll take her out after the show.
So we are going to click next and next to deploy this, and we're just going to hit deploy. Now, because of the way this is set up, what triggers the cat feed to open and close is actually just a deployment completing. So what I'm going to have to do is just hold it up, and we'll know that the deployment finishes because the cat feeder should open. However, in the quick next step, I'm going to show you as well. We're going to show you how you can control it using IoT messages. So I'm just going to keep holding that up until it deploys. And while that's happening, I will just ls in this log directory. There we go.
Very nice.
So that means the deploy worked. But that's kind of not useless, but you don't really want to do a deployment every single time you want the cat feeder to run. So now I'm going to show you how you can quickly control this cat feeder instead. So I'm gonna speed through a little bit of this, but effectively it's very similar to this script. We've got another one here called cat feeder sub, which is going to use PubSub to control the cat feeder. So the main difference is we leverage another component, which is the PubSub proxy component. And we tell our device this is in the recipe, that it has permission to subscribe to a topic, and that topic is going to be cat feeder feed, basically. So that means that if our code, which I'll show you in a sec, tries to subscribe to this topic, it's going to be able to. The other thing we do is we added another step to the lifecycle policy. So before we just had run, now we're actually going to add a new step, which is to install the AWS IoT SDK, because we need that to connect to PubSub. So I'll show you the subscription code. It's a little bit more in depth. Again, all of this on the workshop guide they have a good example of how all this works, but you effectively just need to bring in these IPC libraries. We define the topic that we want to talk over. The rest of this, so this stream event stuff, this is where most of the logic happens. So there's going to be 3 function stubs that you need to include. You could just copy and paste these and replace. Effectively, you're just replacing this block here with whatever logic you want to run when the topic gets when a message comes over the topic. So this stream event is like if a message gets sent to the topic, it comes in here, I print out the message, and then I open and close the cat feeder. That's that same cat feeder class. Again, don't need to worry about it. And then we've got a bunch of exception handling here because, I don't know, I like my code to be sort of safe, and it's a lot easier to debug when you're printing out logs. So really all of this is just fancy sugar on top of the main logic, which is this part here. So I'm going to upload these to a new folder. Again, I have some handy scripts to do this.
One of the questions from the audience is like, do you need a cat for this exercise, right? I was like, the project you could of course customize to suit the particular pet that you're wanting to feed, right? Fairly easily. Yeah. You could
feed a goldfish even. Like, I don't know about electricity around water, but like you could, take it to the extreme. Like any animal you've got around the house, you could try to come up with a feeder for it. So like,
well, you could have a fish feeder, right? Like you're right. Like you could just have the food released from the top of the tank, but then have the IoT device, like, not near the tank.
True.
I mean, we just did like Halloween, and my kids have still got a pile of like lollies. I could do the same thing, enable them to have like one lolly at a time.
I'm not sure if they'd probably like learn how to control the device just to get it to open up and give them more lollies.
Yeah, they probably would. My 9-year-old is doing some programming classes at the moment, so he'd be like, I'm trying to hack this, Dad.
You always learn the best when you've got an incentive.
And somebody did ask, do you play video games, right? So I think Shiva Gaming mentioned that. And so I'm guessing by the Xbox icon, that's what he's kind of spotted down the bottom right.
Yeah, I'm playing. What am I playing at the moment? I am playing. Where is it? I just finished Guardians of the Galaxy, the new game that got released, which is actually so good.
Yeah.
Anyway, I would go off topic. I could rant about that, but I loved it so much. So highly recommend it if anyone's looking for it.
That's in my queue. I did the Assassin's Creed DLC for Valhalla. Then I'm back to Borderlands 3 for a little bit. And then me and the wife have Far Cry 6 co-op lined up. So that's what we're going to start in a couple of weeks alongside Guardians of the Galaxy. So depending on what mood we're in, we're going to pick one of the two of those. She'll either play like at the same time as me when it comes to Guardians, or Far Cry, we can join in and play each other. And Age of Empires 4, that's actually pretty good, the new version of Age of Empires. So that kind of fills the gap when we need a bit of a change from shooters.
Yeah, I've got friends who play that and they're very good. I don't play it because I'm very bad at it, but
we don't play online. We're very bad, so yep.
So what I'm going to do is just, so the biggest difference now is when I paste in this command, we're going to do another S3 copy, but we're going to copy it to a new folder, which is this cat feed sub, which is the pub sub version of this code. So I'm going to copy that in. Now, again, I've got the commands here, so you could actually do all the component deploys and versioning via CLI commands instead. But I think just for the purpose of this, I'm going to use the GUI, but just know that everything you do via the GUI, you can do via CLI too. So if you want to automate this, you definitely can. So I'm going to create a new component. And again, we're going to paste in the YAML for this. I'm going to grab the account ID and region again, so I don't have to paste it twice. And this is this new recipe. So I'm going to copy and paste this into the console. There's no warnings. And create the component. And then we're going to need to update our deployment to use this new version. So we can see we're on version 2 now as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to check this to show components that aren't installed. I'm going to untick the original feed cat. I'm going to install the new cat feed sub instead. So
nice.
And then if you click on this and go configure, you'll get the full config block there. Now I'm pretty sure, yeah, so this works. I'm not sure why this works and the other one doesn't, but if you did need to do a merge, you can do a change here. So later on, if you needed to change the configuration, but you didn't want to push the code up to change it, you can override the configuration here. So you could change, cat feeder. But I won't do that because in the code, we're looking for a specific topic that won't be that one. So just hit confirm. And then, yeah, just basically click yes. And it will show us like, okay, it's going to remove this version. So it gives us a nice little summary of what's going to happen. So jump here. And you can see, yeah, so it's picked up cat feed sub. So it's in the process of deploying it now. What we should see when it's done is, okay, there's a log there already. So it means that the component's on the device, which is good. It's running the install script at the moment, which is that pip command. It looks like it's up and running now, which is good. At least, yeah, looks like it's up and running. So what we're going to do is we're going to publish a message over pub sub to the device. And to do that, you can go to this test field down the bottom here. There's like a browser-based MQTT client. You can publish to any topic you want. So I'm going to grab the topic name. I'm going to put it in there and then put in the cat, please. And I'll pick this up. And when I hit publish, did I do something? Hold on. Interesting. Okay, let me have a look at the code.
Trust me, this always happens on our streams. That's yeah, is always that last little problem. So let's see if we can solve it.
This is the best way to learn services when it doesn't work.
It's true. Okay, so let me just make sure like the topic is correct in the code to start with. So let's open up this. Cat feeder feed. Yep. There's nothing else I've messed up here. And then if I go back to here, I've definitely got cat feeder feed, which is good. What I might do is instead of sending a JSON message, I might send a, because I don't think I use the JSON. Just double check that that doesn't just work. If this works. No, okay.
So if it actually invokes that Python function, where do you see the logs for that? That'll just be.
So for starters, you can cat out the Greengrass log, and what you should see is, I know what I've done. This is, yeah, okay, cool. I know what I've done. I didn't, let's go into the flow and I'll show you what I've done. So we're actually missing a component on the device. So I need to change the deployment slightly. What we're missing is that pub sub proxy or the local pub sub service. So what I noticed when I opened this up was I would see the pub sub service say, hey, I got a new message, but I didn't see that. So I'm like, okay, that means the device isn't getting those messages. So what I need to do is, oops. make a new revision of this. And then I need to select a new component here, which is it's on the second screen. It's not that one. It's I have it in code. Which version it is? It is this one here. This MQTT bridge is what I'm looking for. So we need to customize the bridge just slightly. We need to so let's open up the examples to have a look at what kind of mapping we need to include. So we need to basically tell it that we want to publish a message from IoT Core to the local MQTT server. So we're going to, I'm just going to take this blob and we'll edit it to be what we need it to be. So we'll get rid of the second mapping. Call it the feed or the cat feed. Or maybe that does need to be. Sorry. Cat. You just take what it should be and just have a look. Just make sure I'm not messing up the. So that's what it should look like. And let me paste this back into here. I must have just had this. Yeah, so I changed that when I shouldn't have changed that. So that needs to be MQTT topic mapping at the top. So we've got a feed. We can just call it feed cat mapping. No, what? I don't know why it's getting angry at me. Unexpected A. Okay.
Not sure where that A is coming from.
I wonder if that's just like a benign. I'll just hit confirm just to like. I think that might have just been a bug in the browser editor because it doesn't look like it's having a problem now. It might have just been me copying and pasting stuff in, and there might have been some invisible characters. So, but okay. So what we need is to define that we want this topic here. That topic's going to be coming in from IoT Core, which is what we were just publishing to in the browser. And our target is going to be the local pub sub instance. So I'll hit confirm. I'll hit next, and deploy. You can see the new jobs come in, which is good.
And Rio CS has just asked, what's the hardware device being used? So it's a Raspberry Pi 0W. So we'll be able to see it actually. Like you'll be able to hold it up and see it in a few seconds when we do testing. But there it is. Yeah. Let me remove your screen. We'll make it a little bit bigger. Yeah.
So and then there's a little servo there as well. That's what it looks like. So.
And then a paddle pop stick, which I love, and a sticky note. It's awesome. Yeah, it's very DIY. It's awesome.
It used to be worse, if you could imagine that. It used to be like an old takeaway container that I'd broken in half, and it's improved.
Yep. Well, you can use the 3D printer in the background eventually, right? When it moves out of prototype to production, and you're selling to all these catteries and doggeries.
Exactly. So it is now deployed, which is good. So we should be able to go back to test it and actually have it to work. So I'm going to grab that topic again. Publish the topic. Cat, please. Please wrong again. And then I will hold this up. And when I hit publish, it should work. And then, hit it again and just keep going.
Perfect. There we go.
Oh, and I broke it. My hot glue came off. Okay.
Well, that's okay. Well, we got it working, right? Like, it's good that it lasted until...
Lasted 3 attempts.
Yep, that's perfect. Yeah.
And yeah, you can obviously, like I was saying before, you can see in here that there is a message that was forwarded from that log there. So you get a nice little debug message there. But yeah, that's I guess the end of that sort of project. It was quite fun to put together and leverage Greengrass version 2. I definitely recommend checking it out. If you have the choice between version 1 and 2, definitely go with 2. It's a lot easier to set up, I find. Then number 1 has a lot of problems too. So
perfect. You have a variation of this on your blog, if I remember correctly, as well, right? Like, so you've expanded this not for Greengrass, but something else. Is that right?
Yeah. So it uses our Alexa devices in the house. So I think it's cat. It's under cat. If you just So I've got a cat feeder blog post somewhere. Here we go. So it uses the Alexa Gadgets framework to control the cat feeder. I've got a kind of an image down the bottom of like this. So this is the exact same schematic. It was using a different Raspberry Pi at the time when I built it, but and this was the version 1 of the cat feeder. So it was very, as you can see, homebrew. It's been improved quite a bit. So
it's good to see that the Raspberry Pi will run the servo motor, because like if I tried to run a little DC electric motor, I needed a relay because it didn't have enough current. But I guess the servo motor doesn't need much current, a tiny little motor in there.
It's not really fighting much either. Like if I added more weight, it would definitely have problems, 100%. But at this stage, since it's just opening and closing a flap, it hasn't really had problems. But yeah, you'd need to be aware of that if you were using a big chunky motor.
Very nice. Very cool. Excellent. Well, I could see this being the next big thing. I can see every category having it. Doggeries, as we've mentioned beforehand, I'm sure there's going to be a heap of people in the show that are going to, set up their spare Raspberry Pi Zeros. Like, I know a lot of the audience are into IoT, so they've got some spare ones sitting at home. We did post a link to the workshop, so if you do want to use it without having to purchase a device, or you've got another device that you want to experiment with, that Greengrass workshop as well is really fantastic to run through. So I'd highly recommend, doing that in your spare times if you want to learn more about Greengrass. But I know that we're a little bit over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap up. The last thing that I did want to say is we moved the What's News out so we could have longer, experimenting and troubleshooting code. And I think that worked really well for today. But if you want to hear about the latest AWS announcements, there's a new show that's come out prior to ours. It wraps up 30 minutes before our show in terms of like converting, Australian time. I'm not very good at, but it's basically like 10:30 ADT time, Wednesdays once a month, if I remember. So if you want to kind of see the latest announcements summarized for AWS, join the show before us. You can always check the schedule on AWS Twitch, so I'll put that link in as well. But that's really good for people that come for learning the latest and greatest in AWS. If you still want to do that, join that session. You'll see it appear on the schedule every now and then. It should be once a month, if I do remember correctly, but my memory is terrible. Rovan and Mark run that together along with a series of other people. So go join that. I hope you really enjoyed the session with Nathan today. It was a pleasure having you on, Nathan. If you've got any other IoT projects in the works or, cool Lambda-based or container-based projects that you'd like to show off, feel free to join us in the future. But for everyone else, we'll log off and let you get back to your lunches, your dinners, your breakfasts, depending on where you are in the world. So we'll catch everyone later. Thanks for joining.
Take care all.